Good morning, Michigan. A marvelous Monday to you. It's Michael Patrick Shields, heard all across the state of Michigan. Coach D'Antonio, the voice you just heard, will join us later in the program. He's the Michigan State football coach. And a lot of the Big Ten schools have already had their spring football game, but Michigan State's will be this weekend on Saturday in the afternoon, and we'll find out why he wanted to have it so late and what they've been up to and really what the chances are for the Spartans this year to contend for the Big Ten title. That's coming up later in the program. Speaking of Big Ten titles, Stacy Slobodnik Stoll's Michigan State University women's golf team has won the Big Ten championship for the first time since 2007. They did it Sunday on Easter at Lakeshore Country Club in Glencoe, Illinois. And she'll be with us a little bit later in the program to explain how she did that. It's 8 minutes after the hour right now. And we're going to talk politics this morning, too, as we usually do, because politics is our family business. Ed Sarpolis is going to join us from Target Insights. We've got a lot of things to talk with him about now that we're looking at the countdown to the budget deadline. It's not really a deadline. It's a self-imposed deadline that Governor Snyder has implemented. He wants everything to be done and finished by early June, but not everything is nearly ironed out yet. I'm told there was a lot of action at the Capitol last week, late last week, in fact. But Ed Sarpolis is with us right now from Target Insights. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, sir.
Is it true there was a lot of movement at the Capitol last week?
Well, if you consider sweeping the leaves, yes, probably. But, well, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes going on the budget and bills and legislation. But in essence, that's primarily what's going on down there, trying to negotiate the budget.
Let's go through some of these things if I can and just sort of get your take. The Associated Press, Tim Martin, kind of laid it all out here. This budget deadline that Rick Snyder's imposed, he wants it done by May 31st. Sometimes it's stretched all the way into October, but he wants it done early, in dog years, okay? Right? And so part of the process, people would presume that, well, he's got a Republican House, he's got a Republican Senate, this ought to be easy. But it's not necessarily that easy, is it?
No, it's not. Well, what's happening here is that, especially in the Senate more than the State House, they realize that they have constituents back home that they have to go and say, here's what I did for you. Here's the bacon I brought home. And under Governor Snyder's budget, there is no bacon to take home. It's an empty sack. And, as elected official, Republican or Democrat, you're not going to go home and face the heat to the voters that you depend upon for fundraising and for votes in the fall of November 12 or 14.
Governor Snyder surely knows that, and while he may not care about getting reelected, they do, the senators and representatives.
Well, they do. The other thing is that you have a mature base of senators, returning senators, the returning 5 Republicans: Senator Kahn, Senator Richardville, Jansen, Papa George, and Mike Knopf. They've been around the block. They understand that they've been elected to like the governor, and they were much more seasoned, and they understand what their belief and what their vision of Michigan would be. And many of them, if they had given opportunity, would have run for governor themselves. So they have their own opinions. They're not freshmen. They actually have beliefs of what they think the state of Michigan should be.
The governor, let's take education, K through 12 schools, for instance. He wants a per-student reduction of $300. That's in addition to the $170 per student that was already in place when he took office. The House and the Senate, I guess, are fairly close. They might want to temper that just a little bit. Who's going to win? Because the Democrats are saying they're going to send those kind of cuts would put Michigan schools into insolvency.
Well, they're already seeing some of that already. The state has already avoided trying to take over some of the schools, trying to stretch that through. I would say you're probably going to come closer to the Senate version of not having such deep cuts. You got to remember is you have a lot of parents out there. They're not necessarily Democrats or labor or anything like that. They're just parents in schools, and they're voters or senior citizens. You're going to see much more closer to what the House and Senate do, maybe more leaning towards the Senate on these cuts in education, because these are people who they have to face, the parents, the kids, and you don't want your school back home closing at all, because that's your pride and joy.
Let's talk about universities then. Also the pride and joy. The governor wants to cut aid to individual universities by 15%. Some of them, like Eastern Michigan University, would be more like 20%. The Senate apparently agrees, and the House is proposing some 14%, for 1 less percent. Everybody's worried that the colleges would then just simply raise tuition, and that would be too expensive for some people. But there are penalties built in, too, if the colleges raise the tuition too much.
Well, what's going to happen is that I would say K-12 will have a priority of higher ed. They'll try to accommodate higher ed where they can. On the issue of universities raising their tuition, they will do what makes good business sense. They'll attempt to live within the budget constraints provided by the governor and the legislature. But in the end, especially the bigger universities like Michigan State, U of M, and who are quite dependent on out-of-state students paying much more than our in-state students, they'll continue to take more out-of-state students and basically reduce the number of students they take within the state. So in the end, it's going to come down to a business decision by the university.
We're going to get a 4-year sort of limit, a deadline on welfare payments?
Well, that's something we're still debating, and that's something what's quite surprised me in this one here. Gilda Jacobs has done a very good job of Health and Human Services Division saying, hey, look at here, the more people you take off some of these benefits, the more you create unemployment, the more they become dependent on the state and other services. So I think there might be some accommodation. How much we don't know yet, because you got to remember, they're starting to eliminate some cuts, and you got to find out how you're going to pay for these cuts. So the question is, what's going to be the priority? Education, aid to the people who are unemployed or the poor? We have yet to see that sorted out, and I think that's what you're beginning to see this week.
It seems, from what I'm reading here, the Senate and the House, they don't seem to mind the 4-year limit, but they want even more reductions in some areas, and they also want, as you say, some leniency in certain cases. Retiree income taxes, that started off as a big slash for everyone, and from what I could tell, the governor sort of thought twice about that based on the recommendations of the House and the Senate.
Well, first of all, there's no way, especially since senior votes, and you have a lot of senior citizens, especially in Republican districts, who do go out and vote. They're contributors. They're active in the party. There's no way that Republicans could go back home and tell their seniors their taxes are going to be raised. There might be some accommodation on some caps, or maybe one who pays what. I think in the end there might be some of that. But in the end, there's no way that they could go back home and face the heat or the marchers that are coming to their districts.
One way or another, looks like the business owners are going to get some sort of break. We'll talk about that when we get back with Ed Sarpolis from Target Insights. Also, we're going to talk with Ed about the redistricting that's coming and whether or not this idea of a recall of Governor Snyder could have any legs. It's Michael Patrick Shields all across Michigan.